Hi everyone, my name is Helenique Argeru and I am a peak performance trainer. After 22 years as a clinical psychologist, I have learned a lot about human behavior, and tonight I want to share with you some very interesting statistics about the brain and how our brains are affected from work-related stress. There's a very important piece of information coming soon after this about the actual future of well-being and people at work, and the number one secret, the deal breaker, I call it, for you to master so that you are not one of the statistics in the future with a very specifically damaging, life-changing physical condition because of your work. There's some very interesting information to review there. But tonight we're going to start the conversation off looking at really the brain and how the brain is affected by feeling under pressure at work, being confused about work itself, and or being confused about what your real abilities are at work. There's a variety of causes. We're going to go through them tonight, but I wanted to start us off with a survey that was done by the labor force, and I believe the research is in the United States, where there are large amounts of people in such studies. And this is actually a report, a survey that was done to reveal what we call self-reported symptoms. So people themselves here that are either depressed or anxious in their own review of themselves are actually in these statistics. So 526,000 workers are said to be suffering from work-related stress, depression, or anxiety in the years 2016, the survey revealed. And 12.5 million working days are actually lost due to work-related stress, depression, or anxiety in the same time frame. And the prevalence of career areas that are present in this research, really, there was a much larger amount of people in the health and social work area. People working in healthcare and or in social work are said to be part of these numbers, having work-related stress with depression and anxiety. The next vulnerable group are people working in public administration or in government sector. And then we have people working in education, and then other. So all the other professions are sitting with a much lower level of prevalence of real stress, work-related stress, than public administration and health and social care and education. So what are the causes of stress, and stress specifically related to work? There's a 44% measurement of excessively high workloads being a reason for stress. Unrealistic deadlines, sometimes by bosses who might be really demanding or very self-oriented, perhaps not really in touch with what it takes to get the job done. People feeling rushed, under pressure, overwhelmed. All these fall into this 44% category. Lack of support is the next very interesting statistic to notice. 14% have really work-related stress because they don't feel supported and they don't feel the opportunity to actually develop themselves and to be taken care of. Violence, threats, and bullying. We spoke about the toxic boss, and if you haven't seen that video, you maybe want to have a look at it, where we looked at 7 to 8 types of toxic boss behavior that is actually very bad for us or creates negativity and can actually demoralize the self. It can make people feel very worthless and very much toxic, in a toxic space. So bullying is outright the style of the tyrant, bad boss behavior, someone who is really using a lot of violence or oppression to actually dominate. And this is 13% really feel this work stress. Changes at work can cause about 8% of work-related stress, and really there's a whole group of other factors which are not measured at this point, but really insufficient workloads where people feel like they're being exploited a little or underused in the work that they're doing. Low wages, another reason. And this is a very interesting one, I thought, the lack of professional development opportunities. So often people have spoken to me in private practice, I remember, about the desire to know more and to develop themselves, but not found the means to do that, because work often can just drain us and take all our good juice out. So that's why we have to be careful about who we're working with and what work we're doing, that we do feel a sense of fulfillment. But it seems that work-related stress can come from not feeling like you are supported to develop yourself as a person too. Also, not having a say is another reason that stress can mount at work. We also have this lack of life balance, which I'm sure a lot of you have already encountered, if not encounter regularly, with the overwhelming amount of stress and tension in just being able to relate to society online. There's all kinds of information that is really bombarding our senses continuously. And so we are, really always finding ourselves struggling to keep this balance. And now with technology, that's one other area to include. So we've got our personal lives, our professional lives, our online lives, and we've got a whole bunch of roles that we're playing out all day long. This causes really some significant stress in people who are quite career driven. So what is stress really? I wanted to give you this really excellent medical definition of the cortisol level and the blood sugar in the body, because I think after the age of 35 up to 40 and 45, there's a very significant health life-changing period here where the body is starting to regulate itself in an entirely new way based on what it's experienced and how much the body's been used and in which ways. So under very stressful conditions, we all need to know that cortisol actually pushes the body to circulate glucose. And this actually can get produced by tapping into the protein stores in the body and in the liver itself. So you get this push of glucose, and this is actually what is causing this fight or flight response that we actually were taught about in biology classes at school. And you all know about that system where you're faced by something confronting, stressful or difficult. It's a psychobiological skill that we have, a kind of resilience, and we need to either flee, fly away, move very far away from the danger source, or we need to fight to survive. So we have to either dominate it or we need to get ourselves out of there. And we need this glucose kick to do that. However, when these cortisol levels are going and firing off the glucose repeatedly, when you've been in a very stressful situation, if you're dealing with someone very toxic at work, if you have too much of a workload, if you really have a lot of personal commitments that are not getting fulfilled because of your workload, this can produce incredible amounts of cortisol in the bloodstream. There's an elevated cortisol, and this actually can lead to blood sugar levels increasing because there's so much glucose moving through the body. Now, a result of all of this in the brain is that there is actually a structural remodeling of our neural pathways and our neural architecture. So you keep firing off certain triggers in the brain, the cortisol levels are increased, the blood sugar is up, and there is actually a way that redesigns the structure of the brain. What's really important, though, is to notice that there is a limbic system in the back of the brain. It's the second part to develop that comes after the sensory part of the brain. When we're little fetuses, we develop that first. And then the limbic system, which is all about feelings and all about fear, etc. So when we are stressed, we're in a fear state. And of course, this is also reducing the amount of resilience that we have over time. Now, when this cortisol is in your bloodstream, there's a type of arousal that's happening in the brain where the central nervous system is being affected. And it's really important to notice that once this is being prolonged, so if you are under pressure at work continuously, you run the risk of very specific health-related illnesses such as hypertension, heart disease, cancer, and diabetes. Now, the very technical kind of neuroscientific side of all of this is that there is a part of the brain that's really just before the frontal cortex of the brain that is actually being triggered when we are in a stress response. Now, if you know anything about this area, it's where we do our most higher functioning skills. So our planning abilities, our ability to organize things, to synchronize things, to actually integrate the brain process, it's really being prompted by this front part of the brain. Now, this is a significant thing, because this ability to put attention on something, to regulate your emotions, to plan, to reason with things abstractly, to solve complex problems, we know that this part of the brain is being severely affected when we are stressed for long periods of time, which means you start feeling confused, and in that you actually might also have this inability to get the job done as well as you could before. So the very important findings in another research study really starts to accent the point, saying that we need to understand that there's a hormonal and neurotransmitter, a whole biochemical process going on for us when we are putting ourselves under too much strain, or when we feel too much strain. And there are some really clear statistics that go deeper into this, and they say that really the amount of accidents that result from stress at work are between 60 to 80%. And it's quite clear, very high numbers of people, 70% in fact, have too much work on their plates, and 75% of employees actually do already know and believe that their workers are more stressed out than ever before. So the interesting thing to notice, though, is that sometimes people are compromising. So you need to ask yourself if you might be one of those people. If you are compromising your health and well-being by showing up at work when you're really not well. And this is something that you need to take quite seriously if you've been under pressure for a prolonged period of time. There is quite a tendency for people to spend on healthcare when they're not well, 46%. And 14% of workers actually feel some kind of vehemence or opposition to someone at work, one of their colleagues. And 30% almost of people at work are actually yelled at by one of their co-workers because of stress, indicating to us that along with all these neurochemical changes in the physical body over time, the behavior that we start to show at work changes fundamentally when we are under pressure. Now, I want to move to some solutions that I think are going to be quite important for the future. There's nothing that's going to stop the increasing load of expectation, the demands put on us by our personal lives, our social system, and our professional lives. Nothing's going to stop the train. The real issue is if you can begin to notice your vulnerability post age 40 and start to think of a few ways that you want to prepare yourself to retain what is now becoming a new buzzword in the field of peak performance, and that is your neuroplasticity, right? So we know that there is huge numbers of people that are showing up in older years with degenerative brain disorders or brain conditions. Things like dementia, Alzheimer's are examples of these, Parkinson's. And there's a large batch of research that indicates that the more agile the brain is, the more practiced and exercised the brain is, the less likely the person will develop these degenerative disorders, because they come from a atrophy in the brain structure. And we need to keep training the brain in order so that it doesn't start to show up with this kind of atrophy only. So we need to expand our capacities, learn new things, change our habit patterns, shift our routines, rest, spend time in higher brainwave states. If we can, learn how to reach this peaceful zone where we can restore our energies, and then if possible even learn how to go into these optimal states and maybe even the flow state, which I'll be talking to you about more later on too in another video. So what are these ways that we can decrease our stress immediately? Anybody on this video, or if you click the links on this video, you can actually get a free gift from me. So this is a gift that I'll be explaining to you as to why it works and how it works. And I will also share with you 3 more reasons why you can do something about your brain's impact from being under pressure and or stressed for long periods of time at work. So let me first explain who I am and why I'm sharing this with you. Who am I to be giving you all this information? I, like you, work quite hard in my life. I feel very passionate, very inspired by many things. And I'm also post-40, and I have noticed many, many things changing in my own personal body, in my own mind, and in my emotional zone or my emotional space. As I'm growing older, many things are feeling more comfortable, many things feel more relaxed, and many things continue to be challenging and continue to be stressful in that they require us, me, I would assume you too, to work with a more compact way, a more concise way, a more efficient way to be able to manage all these different parts of life. So when I was young, we had televisions, not many computers yet. Now we each have one in our hand, and we are daily confronted by screens. So we already, just through technology, are having to deal with a lot more than we did when we were young. So the importance of understanding more about the brain is really important, because it's only in the last 50 years or so that brain neuroscientific research has actually grown as much as it has. We didn't have the technology before that to measure brainwave states in real time. So we know now things about the brain that we only suspected before. And so science has begun to look at hormones and how they affect the brain's ability to be in these high functioning states. So if you are a high achiever, and or you're passionate and you're inspired by your profession and by what you do, that's incredibly wonderful. But you need to know, for someone like me, I might encounter you in my office as a clinical psychologist for 22 years. I came across many great people who had all kinds of issues and problems and would arrive in front of me for a variety of reasons. And very often, a high achiever or someone who's very driven can actually be someone who carries a specific amount of adrenaline in their physical nature, and they can burn out at some point. And this prompted me to begin to understand more about anxiety, the spectrum of it, why some people show up with like panic attacks and why other people might show up with a more depressed part of the spectrum, and how to understand what people's emotional struggle really is about, and how to help them see the decisions they need to start making and to find the strength to start making those decisions so that they can alleviate these kinds of stress responses and the tension that they feel. And sometimes not doing the work you love can absolutely be enough of a trigger for stress. Working for a difficult boss, not getting paid what you feel you're worth, working too long hours, having your hours change too much, having very high deadline excitement / dread for long periods of time. And so in my profession as a clinical psychologist for 22 years, it was very clear what I was taught was to be very mindful of people working in the police, people working in teaching, and or people working in very specific medical jobs, that they could burn out more than other people. And this was something we were taught as clinical psychologists, how to work with people that are putting out a lot of energy to care for others. So if you're in one of these professions, you need to know that in terms of the greater spectrum, you are at a higher risk. So I want you to take care of yourself more. What can you do? There are 4 tips here, and I want to explain them to you one by one. And as I said, there will be a gift for the last one for you. If you want to click the link, you can have access to one of these training systems where you actually get the chance to take your brain into another state And this is a state that drops the cortisol level immediately. But really, one thing that's taken the professional world by storm, it's a buzzword, it's called mindfulness, is actually a way of bringing the mind's attention into the present moment. And there are many ancient traditions that support this technique, and they have now been brought into mainstream commercial training arenas, and this technique has been taught, and it can be taught to you very easily. So if you are interested to learn more about that, you can do a training seminar, and you can also connect with me. I can teach you that very easily and extend it into a much deeper practice, which will restore your parasympathetic and central nervous system even more. Mindfulness does exactly that. It starts to help the brain to move out of the adrenal activated states. So it's no longer your reactive primal, what we call the reptilian brain, the back of the brain, that's responding to the pressure you feel at work and the demands put on you. You now start to have a kind of calmness in your ability to focus, to bring your attention into the present moment, and to be very mindful about what you would want to respond with as opposed to react with. A very interesting study was done for the second thing that you can do on the bonding rituals that human beings have. Us coming into relationship with other partners in life is an excellent way to actually stimulate a specific hormone called oxytocin. This is very applicable to women. And this actually increases positive communication between two people in a conflict. And especially if there's a couple and there is a relationship between them and they find ways to communicate really well, and they can have positive communication when there is conflict, this can actually reduce cortisol levels. So when you are feeling very aggravated or very stressed and you're in a relationship with someone, try to find courses that can help you learn to communicate positively and calmly and steadily with your partner. And communication can sometimes be a long step process where you learn how to bring up an idea, you learn to take it a little bit further next time, and then you deepen it, you express feelings about it later on so that you can spread it out so that it's not always one high impact discussion. And these kinds of communication strategies, nonviolent communication is another one, and process work psychology deals very specifically with how to dismantle the conflict. All these different ways are around, and we can study them now more easily than ever before, and they can help us really to learn to bond more successfully when we are in stressful times, as opposed to going onto the other side of the spectrum, which is to erupt and become really volatile. So bonding is your second very important area where you can actually decompress the physiological effects of being under pressure or stressed at work or about work. The other very interesting area to explore is the whole area of brain training that's really also become prolific on the internet now. All kinds of systems exist. Brain gym and brain sports type apps are everywhere to be found. And technology really is changing neuroscience, and neuroscience is changing technology. So when you look at the neuroscientific evidence, there is some very interesting information about how an approach to your daily stress, a skill that helps you deal with your stress day to day, can actually influence you in a really important way. It can change the physiological effects of stress that you're feeling. And this is also increasing your ability to induce states of mindful awareness. So you have, again, this mindfulness, but it's also connected to the neuroplasticity here, where you are able to actually stretch the brain and create different ways for this daily stress to be diffused by practicing a technique where your brain is able to remove attention from something that's causing you a lot of repeated thought, maybe your cyclical thoughts in your mind, to be able to decompress your breathing. This is another very powerful technique. In fact, our breathing rate and our heart rate slows immediately to actually bring a decrease in blood pressure, and blood supply is actually redirected into the brain the minute we learn to regulate breath. So training the brain to do any number of these things, to be mindful, to regulate the breath, to slow down the breath when we are very activated. Meditation is another way. These are all ways of training your brain. I also have a way to do that with drumming and percussion, where you begin to strategically place the hands in very bilaterally symmetrical positions on the drum. So I'll be telling you about that soon as well. And this helps you to build this very speedy effect back down into a slowed and regulated decrease of speed in your breath and in your whole inner workings. And this takes your brainwaves out of what we call beta brainwave, which is constantly thinking about different things, or constantly worrying, or feeling a lot of emotion that is negative or even adrenaline based, and slowing down the brainwave frequency in the brain and actually taking this cortisol level much, much lower. Something else that does this, which is my great joy to share with people, and I use this as a therapeutic tool to actually help very specific families who are struggling with sensitive children and or children who have special needs. And we use this principle, what's called rhythmic entrainment intervention, and it's really based on 30 years of study on the way that the brain is learning to entrain or concentrate on a very subliminal below volume level sound that is highly complex and very, very stimulating. This actually creates a very specific kind of relationship between the sound and the brain, like a pendulum, the one knocks against the other, and it causes a much deeper state of concentration, which then relaxes the brain over time because it's done in a feeding in and out type system. And this in the end brings the brain into the alpha brainwave state, which is again what meditation does, what nature does, what mindfulness training is also doing. And it's again dropping the cortisol level. So the saliva-based cortisol level actually is no longer increasing even when the stress response is around. This is the data that's shown in a very recent study on the presence of music and stress. And when compared to silence, in fact, silence can actually up to 30 minutes still see the body increasing in its cortisol levels. So when you're being silent, after being very stressed, you could still be running all those chemicals. But when you're listening to music and or even going into rhythmic entrainment states, we are definitely seeing a decrease in the saliva cortisol level as well there. So this rhythmic entrainment intervention is a customized process where we look at very specific symptoms, and then we start to decrease those with a 4-month daily home program intervention. But for anyone stressed or under pressure, I'm going to be sending you a 30-minute piece of percussive music that you listen to before you go to sleep, and you can know that that will give you a benefit for up to 6 hours. You can listen to it during the day if you're at work, and it's my gift to you for being on the call today. And it's organized by the Strong Institute, and it's a sample of audio that we use for all kinds of issues, from epilepsy, anxiety, autism, ADD, all the way through to schizophrenia and all kinds of mental and emotional conditions and disorders. But actually we are seeing a decrease of all these symptoms because we managed to flush out the central nervous system stressor response by putting this brain into an alpha brainwave state. There are other things that REI can do, like optimize the brain to reach flow states. But tonight I wanted you to know that if you are in a critical situation or in a crisis and you need to sleep and you need to really relax, you can listen to this audio and get the benefit for up to 6 hours. For long-term benefits, a customized program is definitely advised. But for now, let me know if you have any questions on this subject. We will be going much deeper next week when we look at the future of well-being And the number one thing you need to absolutely master and manage about your career path so that you are not one of the statistics of people contracting or developing a really serious illness, which is predicted for the future in high amounts. And I'll be telling you about those next week. So not to scare you, but to prepare you, I say. And if you want to join this VIP list, you're very welcome. That's where you'll get the replays for these videos, and you'll also be getting the reminders every week of the next one that's coming. So thanks so much for watching. I hope this was helpful to you. Remember, your 4 very important areas to develop now is to actually work on your communication skills so that you can work on this journey of conflict with partners, so that you can benefit from the hormones produced when you bond with someone. This will help drop your stress level over time repeatedly. To learn the technique of mindfulness and or meditation, and or to train your brain in many different ways. Keep your brain adapting, keep your brain inspired and stimulated, but not overstimulated. And then you might even want to be considering music. Taking up a musical instrument is really a powerful thing to do for stress, and to actually work with the REI gift that I'll be giving you is a way for you to really calm down moments that you are struggling with. Thanks so much, everyone. Take care and good night.